Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Willem van der Brugge and I'm the Secretary General of the Confederation of European Probation, CEP. And we are delighted to have you here to participate and share in this CEP webinar on remote supervision. Before we start, please let me introduce briefly our organization. The Confederation of European Probation, CEP, is a non-political, non-governmental organization which brings together probation services from around Europe. CEP currently has 35 countries in membership, of which are 25 EU member states, large and small, new and old, from the north to the south and the east to the west. In 1981, so more than 40 years ago, it was the number of foreign prisoners in Europe that gave at that time 11 members, Western European countries, cause to join forces and found CEP. CEP is the single largest European network organization for the sector of probation and community justice, with the capacity to reach probation staff at both a managerial and an executive level. And then I mean practitioners and middle managers. It includes academic and researchers in probation from all over Europe in its network, both as individuals and as member universities and research institutes. CEP promotes pan-European cooperation in the development and delivery of community sanctions and measures. All activities of CEP, from conference and workshop, expert groups, online events, publications, such as Probation in Europe, the CEP website and newsletters, are targeted towards the probation sector across all European jurisdictions, specifically towards the member organizations. CEP has its headquarters in Utrecht. But let's go to the topic of today, remote supervision. This is a topic that came up during the COVID-19 pandemic, when probation officers were forced to work with their clients from a distance. CEP started collecting all the national protocols on how probation organizations in Europe dealt with the COVID-19 crisis. And as you might know, CEP collected more than 30 stories from probation professionals working from home, how it is working from behind the kitchen table or in the bedroom. We also organized online Director General's meeting where the senior managers could share their experience on working with the new situation, how to deal with the backlog on community measures, the well-being of staff, and how to deal with supervision, or better, are there alternatives for face-to-face contacts? Recently, we noticed that in some jurisdictions, research has been done on remote supervision. Does it work? How does it work? Is it effective? And do you have to make special arrangements? What do you do as a professional? Issues we'd like to share with you today. And for this afternoon, we have two eminent speakers. Dr. René Henskens, researcher and teacher at the University for Applied Sciences in Utrecht, at the Netherlands, and Ms. Julia Audig, criminologist working at the Baden-Württemberg Ministry of Justice in Germany. Both colleagues will be sharing their experience and the research done on remote supervision. Good to know is that after each presentation, we take some time for questions and answers. And please ask your questions via the Q&A function. CEP Policy Officer Mirka Jakosova will keep track on that. And also good to know is that all the sessions will be recorded and that will be published the webinar materials on the CEP website and the media for your reference. Enough for now. I hand over to René Henskens. René, the floor, or I should say screen, is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is René Henskens. I'm a researcher at the University of Applied Science in Utrecht. I work at the research group working with mandated clients. We carry out various research projects at mainly the prison and probation service, but also in forensic and social settings. Besides being a project leader and researcher, I'm also a teacher at our master's program, Forensic Social Professional. The research I discussed today was carried out in close cooperation with the Dutch Probation Service. In this presentation, I will explain the ins and outs of the study. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to share. In this presentation, I would like to discuss the following points. First, I illustrate the background of the study. Then, I shortly discuss the research questions and methods. I will present the main results that we have obtained from the literature study, the survey, focus groups, and seminar. And I finish with the conclusions and recommendations. After that, I think it would be nice to show a short film of our study that we developed for the probation officers. This film lasts about 4 minutes, and it provides a nice overview of the study findings. So my whole presentation will last about 20 minutes. Since this is an online presentation and I can't see you while sharing my slides, I will kindly ask you if you will keep your questions for the end, if that's all right with you, of course. We started our study in 2020, at the time the Netherlands experienced the second wave of the corona pandemic. Remote supervision took off at the probation service, but little was known about how to work remotely with mandated clients. The main question was how probation officers could build up and maintain a working alliance when probationers were remote. We collected first experiences of both POs and probationers with remote supervision and compared these experiences with international literature. As the probation service was interested in whether remote supervision was beneficial for certain subgroups of probationers and in which phases of the trajectory, we also took these questions into account. What is remote supervision actually? We defined remote supervision as online contacts through, for instance, video conferencing, telephone, or WhatsApp. E-health interventions and web-based modules were excluded. The research questions of the study were as follows. What experiences do POs and probationers have with remote supervision? What advantages and disadvantages do they see? For which clients do POs and probationers consider remote supervision suitable for, and why? For which phases can remote supervision be used well? And how can the working alliance, according to POs and probationers, be best executed in remote supervision? As said before, we carried out various data collection methods. In the survey, for instance, we gathered general opinions of both POs and probationers. In the focus groups and seminar, we went deeper into topics which needed special attention. We discussed the working alliance, risk management, online conversation techniques, and work-life balance. We organized separate surveys and focus groups for POs and probationers. The seminar was for POs only, as in this meeting, the methods used in remote supervision were central. As for the findings of the study, we asked POs what they thought of remote supervision. And on this slide, you see some general opinions. POs found remote supervision flexible. They experienced that the online contact can be made shorter and more often, also outside office hours. Remote supervision also saves time and travel costs. Most POs found online contacts more equal than offline contacts. And this is an interesting fact that I will discuss later. According to POs, remote supervision is indeed suitable for certain probationers and in certain phases of supervision. Due to the sudden change to remote working, POs said they had to get used to it. It was striking that many POs were not aware of the technical possibilities that remote supervision offers. Finally, all POs called for more knowledge and training with respect to remote supervision. Also, probationers expressed their feelings about remote supervision. They said they like to make use of the flexible offer, and they found the POs more accessible. They were also happy with the decreased travel costs. Some probationers stated that it felt like a relief not having to come to the office. Somebody had a quite simple explanation for that. It made me feel less like a criminal, he said. On the other hand, some probationers missed the personal contact in online work. A number of probationers experienced technical problems with remote supervision, and this was due to limited skills and resources. It was remarkable that some probationers took more liberties in an online environment than face-to-face. For instance, they called in a noisy room, so it was difficult to have a conversation. POs expressed some bottlenecks and challenges concerning remote supervision. First, online conversations were experienced as more tiring than face-to-face conversations. And this is partly due to the fact that probationers are more easily distracted online. Secondly, PO stated that in an online setting, risk signals were more difficult to pick up. Several POs mentioned, for instance, the smell of alcohol on probationers with drinking problems, which is overlooked in remote supervision. Furthermore, POs found not all offline conversation techniques one-to-one transferable to an online setting. They had questions. How do you deal with reactants? How do you bring empathy? And how do you check whether the probationer is still connected to the online conversation? POs also found it difficult to set boundaries and to perform their controlling task. Lastly, it appeared to be difficult to deepen the conversation. We asked POs which probationers benefit most from remote supervision, and various subgroups were mentioned, like probationers with low risks and mild problems, motivated and skilled clients, young adults because they are used to online contacts, anxious, lonely clients because they feel safe in their own environment and POs could have more online contacts, and clients who are prone to sensory overload, for instance, persons with ADHD or autism. However, opinions about these groups differed. Some POs found young adults and clients with autism suitable for remote supervision, and others didn't. According to POs, remote supervision is useful at the end of supervision if there's any stability, when the working alliance has been established and problems are solved. Remote supervision is also useful if a community sanction needs to be monitored or with more business-like contacts. In cases with a lot of paperwork or if collaboration with network partners is needed, it is better to work offline. We also gathered information about the Working Alliance. The Working Alliance concerns the dynamics in the collaboration between PO and probationer. There are 4 characteristics of the Working Alliance: goals and restriction, that's 1, trust, bond, and reactance. According to the theory of Working Alliance, a professional can influence the outcome of supervision through an effective use of these characteristics. In the survey, we confronted POs and probationers with a number of statements. We checked whether remote supervision, in their opinion, influenced the 4 characteristics of the Working Alliance. And we found the following. POs prefer to discuss rules in a face-to-face mode. They also found it difficult to address negative behavior in an online setting. Both actions had to do with goals and restrictions. Some POs found it hard to estimate whether a probationer was honest online, which had a relationship with trust. Many POs experienced a greater risk of miscommunication in remote supervision, which, in their opinion, could easily lead to feelings of resistance, and this is characteristic for reactants. In general, probationers appear to be more positive about the working alliance than the POs. They showed confidence in the PO and in their collaboration, which has to do with trust. They expressed feelings like, I feel understood and we can agree. They claimed they understood the rules the POs explained online. On that matter, they differed from the opinions of the POs. It was remarkable that probationers stated that they were less talkative online. This may also be a reason why POs found remote conversations exhausting, as we have seen before. So what conclusions can be made? We claim that by training the POs online technical skills and conversation techniques, their ability to work hybrid, and that's a mix between monitoring and guidance, can be improved. As this research has shown, there is a strong need for more knowledge and training. Experienced POs, like cognitive behavioral trainers, can take a leading role in the education of others. What we also have seen in this study is that the flexible use of remote supervision has a downside, namely the disruption of work-life balance. We think POs must be more aware of their increased client contacts and what it means to have these contacts in their own homes. Regarding the suitability of remote supervision for different subgroups of probationers, we learned that it is not easy to include or exclude predefined groups on forehand. We recommend to make an assessment per client on the basis of individual factors. Lastly, in the recommendations of our study, we plead for a manual and a training in which POs are given tools for how they can add more structure and content to remote supervision. At this moment, we are developing these products in close cooperation with the probation service. As remote supervision appears to be suitable for certain stages in probation process, we also want to investigate how to give shape to a blended form of probation. Which parts can be easily done online and which parts do we prefer to do face-to-face? Finally, we want to investigate how we can use the working alliance more adequately in an online setting. Well, so much for my story. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please save them just a little bit longer for after the short film, which Willem will show you, because this URL doesn't work in this presentation.
We take some time for questions and answers. Who would like to raise a question?
We have a question.
Okay.
It's from Jan Winkler, who mentioned that your research shows the requirements and challenges of digital transformation. He specifically says that he hopes that digital counseling becomes a complementary tool in probation even after Corona. However, it needs a professional concept of use.
Can you reflect on that, Renee?
Yes, the same process is going on at the Dutch probation service. They are thriving to a blended form of probation supervision. And I think the manual and training develops in that direction of a blended form. Certain phases can be done remotely and certain phases must be done face-to-face. So I recognize the things he says.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Renee, I have a question too. You mentioned there's a difference between how probation officers cope with remote supervision. I see the same happening at the CP, at the probation headquarters. There are people who say, I can't work from home, I have to be at the office. And there are others who do it perfectly, can cope with it perfectly. How do you cope with that? Because if you have someone, who find it very, very difficult.
Yeah, we looked at, are there maybe some characteristics of POs? Is it more, does it have to do with experience of POs? We haven't looked at it well to make, I can't say it what it is, but I recognize what you say. Yes, some POs adopt very well to remote working and others don't.
Okay. And then you also mentioned, and that triggers me, of course, and many of us, I think, the balance between work and private life. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
I think it has to do with the flexibility of remote working. The contacts are shorter and probationers take more liberties to contact probation officers, also outside of office hours. And WhatsApp is an easy device. Probation officers think, oh, I can make an appointment with this client, and but they do it so easy, also outside office hours. So I think they must protect their own time a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that is. We had in one meeting with the director generals, there was a director general telling that it was in their organization forbidden to send an email after 6:30 because people they lost, let's say, the border between what is private and what is working time.
Yes, I can imagine that. Yeah.
Okay, another two questions, if I may interrupt. The first one is from Mr. Mihanovac. He asks whether remote supervision affected risk assessment and how.
Sorry, I can't understand.
If remote supervision affected risk assessment and how.
Risk assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it affects risk assessment according to POs themselves. They say that risk signals are not easily recognized online. POs can't recognize face expressions, not always in an online environment. That's one. And they think that probationers are not always honest online in an online environment. So they think, probation officers think that in a face-to-face setting, they see more than in an online environment. So that risk signals could more easily picked up.
Okay, we have another question from the Czech Republic. Do you think that the remote supervision will become a part of the everyday work of probation officers after the COVID period is over?
Well, I think that's an exciting question because it's a search for the probation service how to deal with remote supervision. I think they are getting to blended form. So some activities can easily be done online, but some activities can better be done face-to-face.
Okay, we have really a lot of questions. Another question from Mr. Winkler. He asks about how the issue of privacy is handling when using WhatsApp, whether the offenders have to sign a consent form or something else.
That's a very interesting question, which we have not investigated in this study. But what I know from the Dutch probation service is that they have rules about how to deal with WhatsApp. It is not safe enough, so certain contacts are not allowed to deal in WhatsApp, but to make quick appointments, it is allowed. But it's there are privacy issues with WhatsApp. Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a reason, Renee, that some probation organizations developed apps which you can install on your mobile phone. Yeah, changing life from the PBNI is one of them, and the Dutch probation also developed one, because then you're more in control regarding privacy. But it's definitely an issue. Yeah. More, Mirka?
Yes, we have another two questions. One is on your study. Mr. Pereira asked if in your study you found any cultural differences in the alliance in online settings.
No, that would be interesting though, but we have done a study with not enough numbers of probationers to make to present results on that.
So more research is needed.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Mirka?
Yes, and the last question from Romania, and it's slightly longer, so I will split it. The first part of the question is if you deliver also online social reintegration programs, like individual or group programs, and whether do you think that remote supervision is a step to use the artificial intelligence in probation activities?
I can't quite, I didn't done research at that. Can you, I don't know.
Well, I know that during the COVID, some organizations provided online but individual programs, and were in contact on that way with their probationers. But if that will stay, I don't know if that still is the case.
Well, the question is exactly if remote supervision will be suitable for interventions like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I know that in the Dutch probation service, the cognitive behavioral interventions went remote on an individualized basis, and it worked well.
Yeah.
So it's promising in that way.
But no research has been done on that.
No, but we will do that this year. Yeah, we set up a research protocol to investigate whether cognitive behavioral trainings could be done remotely.
Okay, but if I can come back, well, we have a follow-up from Romania, because well, as mentioned, in Romania they provide online programs too, like Drink and Drive. And the question, which leads me back to the previous question, is whether you think these kind of programs, which are delivered online, both individual and group programs, whether they work, whether they're effective.
Okay, now I understand the question. Yes, an effectiveness question is always difficult in this stage because it's all so new, but I think it would be worth to experiment with it and to check if it's possible to do it remotely, and to check how the probationer respond on that.
I see another question coming in from my dear colleague Laura Negredo. The question is, did you assess the difference between remote individual supervision and remote group work? For example, intervention with it, more or less the same, yeah, with a group of veterans, yeah. Is there a difference between a group and an individual? Yeah.
No, we didn't assess that. What we did in this study was to check first experiences with remote supervision with probationers and probation officers, but we didn't explore any comparisons.
Okay. If Mirka, you also mentioned artificial intelligence.
Yes.
What was the question?
Yes, whether you think that remote supervision is a step to use the artificial intelligence in probation activities.
Well, that's a broad question. It's the same with virtual reality remotely. Is that possible? It would be great to set up some first experiments with it.
Yeah. Okay. More questions, Mirka, for now? And I have one. Okay. Last question. You mentioned the guidance which you are developing. And can you elaborate a bit more on that? And do you need help from the audience?
Yes, we are developing a manual and a training for probation officers so that they can bring more structure and content to online supervision. But we are in a preliminary stage, so we are doing a literature study and we are talking to people, especially probation officers themselves, what they think about the manual. And I would like to use this platform to ask to probation officers who are present here if they have experiences with manuals and trainings like that, and if so, if we could talk to them for experiences so that we can use them for our manual and training.
Okay. Well, I like to say, make yourself known. Contact CEP and we will forward your contact details to René. René, if there are no more questions, Mirka, I'm looking to you. Then I like to close this session. Thanking René. Okay, good. Then we move to the next presenter, which is my dear colleague Julia Audig, criminologist at the Probation and Court Assistance Service in Baden-Württemberg, or perhaps better to say Bewährungs- und Gerichtshilfe from Baden-Württemberg. Julia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to speak at this conference. My name is Julia Audig. As you said before, I come from southern part of Germany and I work at BGBW, which provides the probation and court services. And there I work at the headquarter of BGBW in the Central Social Work Department. And my tasks include research projects, social diagnostics, and also the cooperation between prison and probation services. I also have a presentation for you, and I will begin to share it.
It works.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will start with the situation at the beginning in our probation service in Baden-Württemberg. And like in all countries, we were at the beginning, due to the corona pandemic, probation and judicial assistance stopped personal client contacts with only a few exceptions in March 2020. And these exceptions were, for example, high-risk offenders. But our mandate and services, we continued to be offered. And at this point of time, we did not have any video tools. And so the contacts to the clients took place by telephone. Now, we asked, how is subordination to a probation officer designed in times of crisis? And to these questions, we designed a little study, evaluation of electronic client documentations. Therefore, we watched 51 file notes and also a questionnaire to the probation officers. There were 52. And in which probation officers were asked about the assessment under these circumstances. While we did the inspection of files, we asked who made the contact, the probation officer or the client? Had agreements been made with the clients through these telephone conversations? And which topics were discussed? Was the telephone contact corresponded to the defined intensity of care? Was it less or more than in face-to-face setting? And was the case ongoing or in the initial survey phase? Was the client used to the probation setting, or was it a new setting for him or for her? Yes, we did this. I also mentioned this question. We saw that in April of 2020, 67% of the contacts were made by probation officers, and in May that were 67%. And so we can say the majority of probation officers established the contact with the clients, but there was also the fact that clients contacted their probation officers directly. We wanted to know, while we did the inspection of files, which topics were discussed in these telephone calls. And we saw a wide range of topics also in the context of the telephone consultation. Accumulation in both months in the field of employment or activity, perhaps due to the lockdown situation. Conditions and instructions were also frequently discussed with probation officers, and the need to talk about the financial situation, the social environment, and health issues is also reflected. And we saw decrease of the topic risk management between April and May. The positive experience with the initial survey interviews through the telephone contacts, that was a quite interesting fact, because we did a focus on the new cases. And here you can see some interesting points that are quotes from probation officers. And For example, they said due to the open-minded behavior of a client, an initial survey could be completed. This came as a great surprise to me. The attitude of the client was very positive. Or I myself asked more direct questions and received detailed answers. Some thought clients are more relaxed and not as tense as in a personal conversation. The initial assessment on the phone took less time than during personal contact. A working relationship could be established more quickly, and topics marked with shame could be discussed more easily. But also difficulties with this initial survey interviews at beginning of the probation time came up. Some of the interviewees are decisively lacking the facial expressions and gestures of their counterparts. And this makes the course of the conversation more difficult, and one has to listen much more closely or pay attention to one's wording in order to prevent misunderstandings. Or it can be difficult to build up trust, and clients react very suspiciously to answer questions in person, or even tell their life story to someone they don't know. It's difficult to judge whether what is being said has been received. On the other hand, clients also tell more because they don't see my reaction. And that is also a very interesting point. Here you can see more quotes to the question, what other experiences have you made with regard to telephone counseling? Some telephone calls were surprisingly long. Clients were more relaxed in their familiar surroundings, or clients who I did not expect to hear from me, clients who I thought would have problems with the situation, coped well with it. Mood is more relaxed on the phone, the struggle for appointments is eliminated, calls from the home office have a familiar atmosphere, and clients touch on private issues of their own accord. Another is, it is uncomplicated and very practical. Clients can sometimes be reached more reliable than if they have to come to appointments. It works much better than expected. All topics can be discussed very well, especially for purely organizational matters. Personal meetings are not necessary. There's no need to travel, which is a great advantage. It would be desirable that in future more emphasis is placed on telephone consultation. And on this point of time, it was the telephone consultation. Now we are at video consultation. And yes, a short summary and outlook before I tell you something about our situation at the moment. The assessment of the asked practitioners allow the conclusion for the BGBW that telephone consultation and/or consultation by video. Chat could also be a serious option for suitable cases in future. And how have things developed in our probation service? You can see that the face-to-face meetings are the main contact form, are still the main contact form, and we have now also the video chats. Therefore, we use WebEx, and we have another form, we use Messenger, and there we use Telegram. We use now at the moment Telegram, but we will have our own app. It will be called a BGBW app, and we will have this app available in a few months. And this is a great advantage for us because of data protection and some of the questions you mentioned before about this topic, data safety. And another question is, will we return to the old situation of face-to-face meetings? And you saw before that our main part is the face-to-face meetings. In the meantime, each probation officer has his or her own notebook. So they all can work very flexible. They can choose whether they work from home office or from their facility offices. And probation officers can choose now also if they do video contacts with their clients or face-to-face meetings. And here you can see we did the video contact count like a face-to-face meeting, and it's up to probation officers whether they choose face-to-face or video contact. We have an inspection with high-risk offenders, but I will tell something to that point later. In year 2021, we have also from January till June counted the video contacts probation officers made with clients, and that were 902 contacts, which is 32 and about 33% of all the contacts. And we going on to evaluate these experiences, which is very important. This is something also mentioned in the presentation before, or also in the questions. Will there be hybrid forms of contacting service users, of contacting clients? And yes, the form of contact depends on the professional assessment. It depends on, yes, suitable for this case. Is a video contact suitable for this case? A question which is asked by the probation officer at the beginning or in the ongoing contact with the client. And very important, the training in video consulting for the probation officers, because it's still a very new form of social work to us. Yes, we have nowadays 3 different training courses on the topic online counseling. Our probation officers can learn about the basics of online interviewing and online counseling methods and can be implemented online. They hear about the advantages and disadvantages of different digital communication channels. And for our mediators, which do victim offender mediation at BGBW, we provide a special training in online mediation, which is also very helpful. Will technology take over? Yes, it's the digitization will open up new opportunities in the field of social work. But these must be evaluated in the light of the interests of all those involved, the clients, the professionals, and also the law enforcement agencies. Other important topics, of course, are data protection, technical equipment, or professional framework condition. Now I will tell you a little bit about our experiences from our probation officers in the practical work. I start with a video contact. What is our practical experience with these video contacts by WebEx? I start with the advantages of video contacts for our clients. Yes, as you can see, the appointments are more compatible with work or family life, and so more frequent appointments are possible. Long journeys can be avoided, which is cost and time saving. Clients are in their familiar environment during the conversations. That could reduce fears in conversation. Possibility of virtual flat viewing with probation officer. This is something I heard, and which is a new opportunity for the video contacts, and is very interesting too. And sometimes it's a more relaxed atmosphere due to the distance. but also the question, what prerequisites should clients bring with them for doing these video calls? Yes, the environment should be free of disturbances during the appointments. The important thing, the data protection must be guaranteed. Also, do partners, family members know about delinquency and probation? Clients need a certain level of technical know-how. The clients need the technical equipment, a video-capable device, stable connection. Most of our clients, so we know so far, use mobile phones because they don't have a notebook or something else. The video tool should be as user-friendly as possible. No complicated download or registration. The best probation officers told us is to send only a link, and the clients can follow this link easily and are in the conversation. And now for the probation officers, which are the advantages of video contacts? That are very similar to the advantages for our clients. The appointments are more compatible with work-life balance, and this important thing, also the journeys and time and cost saving. The clients come less often without an appointment, which can also produce stress if when the probation officers are in the offices, in the facilities. And also the more relaxed atmosphere due to the distance can be an advantage. Also more flexible time management. One probation officer told me, for example, that she adds video contacts to the face-to-face meeting for high-risk offenders, so that she can see these clients more often as in the only face-to-face contact. So you can use this form on top. One example from the practice. Distance can be used methodically and work specially with shameful topics. What are now the challenges for probation officers in video contacts? The appointments need to be prepared more carefully. And how do I make sure that what I said reaches the client over distance and the other way around? How to deal with the distraction and disturbances in the client's environment that might be. We asked for which clients are video contact less suitable, and so far it seems to be less suitable for clients with an acute mental illness, for example, or clients living in precarious housing conditions, unreliable clients, which have also problems to come to the face-to-face meeting. And it could be that the online meetings are, very, very difficult for them. Clients with a few technical skills and clients with an acute substance abuse. As I told before, we use also messenger tools on top or as an option to get in touch with the clients. And here also, what is our practical experience with these messenger tools? And I told you we use Telegram, and in a few months, so we have our own app, and this we think this is much more suitable to the practical work for our behavior, for our probation officers. And here for it's a small result of 71 evaluated questionnaires to probation officers about the positive effects of using messenger tools. This questionnaire did my colleague Yvonne Morik. And she found out that the easy way to stay in touch probation officers is more present in everyday life. through this messenger tools. An easy data exchange is possible for letters the clients receive and has some questions. You can use voice messages. A fast and regular exchange is also possible. The chat can be used also as a kind of to-do list for the clients, so they can see what questions they told the probation officers and which answers, and what they have to do until the next conversation. And the questions of the clients do not to be have saved until the next conversation, and the contact can be made directly if there is a concern. And I think everyone uses messenger tools. Why shouldn't we try it to use it in social work context as well? And these are some facts of the positive things we found out in our practice. So now I come to the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for listening and for your questions.
Thank you, Julia. I find it very interesting. I have some questions, but I like to invite the participants if they have questions.
We actually have one question in a chat, and I myself have a question too. So the question is, who starts? So we start with chat. Yes. Okay, so it's from Mr. Winkler, who has two questions. How did you overcome resistance from probation officers to work with new media, and was there none? And the second one is, how do you handle the documentation of Telegram messages, case file relevant, and well, all the case file in general?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the documentation of the Telegram messages was also some problem probation officers mentioned, because it's in fact it's very time intensive. If you type word by word, or also a summary, and that's another reason for our BGBW app, because there you have a data exchange to our documentation, so that will improve the practical work. And can you please repeat the first part of this question?
Sure. The first question was, how did you overcome resistance from probation officers to work with new media, and whether there were some kind of resistance to work with new media?
Yes, I think yes, there is resistance, and it depends on how, I would say it depends on how much are you used to this type of communication, how open-minded are you as a social worker also, if this form of communication belongs to your work or not. It's a great discussion. And for that, we provide these trainings I mentioned, and to inform closely and to give help and to give examples how you can use it in a positive way in your practical work. And it's not like that probation officers have to or must use this, but now with the form of having notebooks and can go to home office and work flexible, the most are in touch with it and yes, deal with that. But there is also resistance. Yes.
Okay, Mirka, your question, or is there another question?
We have another question, but it's kind of similar to the first one. How you keep the records evidence on telegrams and video calls in probation file? In Telegram, you already mentioned, and how about video calls? Can you maybe elaborate more on that?
Yes, in video calls, I would say it's similar to the face-to-face meetings. Yes, I don't know any difference. It's the same way. I would say so.
Okay, thank you.
Your question, Mirka?
Well, my question is much more connected to the future. I noticed that you mentioned that in June 2021, if I'm correct, 32% of cases were handled through video calls. I wanted to ask whether you have some numbers on how the situation is now, because, well, Germany, if I'm correct, adopted 2G approach. And I would like to ask if you can maybe say more how it works with practice. Was this 2G approach applied to the probation service as well?
So now I can only speak for Baden-Württemberg, and unfortunately I don't have the numbers for the second half year in 2021 at the moment. So I can only say the point of time in June 2021 was like that. And but I can imagine, it might be wrong, but I can imagine that there will be a decrease because probation officers make, there's a routine. Some probation officers make their positive experiences with the video counseling also negative. I don't want to say with that it's only positive and only good. As I said in the presentation, it depends on the clients and also on the probation officer. It depends a bit, I think it depends on routine, it depends on training. How do I as a probation officer, I have to leave a little bit my comfort zone, my face-to-face meeting. It's new, sometimes it's stress. And yes, we want to avoid this a little bit in positive examples and also in this provided trainings for the probation officers.
Okay, can you give an example on that, Julia? How do you safeguard, let's say, the balance between, as mentioned by René, between the work and private work situation and private? Because what you mentioned, the word flexible, that was an advantage of working with remote supervision. But what is, let's say, the dark side?
Yes, okay. Yes, of course, there is a dark side. And we have many probation officers, they were very glad. And also the opportunity for mothers or fathers of little children and all things like that, about also for people without children to be flexible and to have another work-life balance. But not everyone likes that. Not everyone likes to work from home, and the disturbances at home are very difficult sometimes. And yes, we can say also with this home office situation, the probation officers come regularly to their facilities, and because they like very much the contact and the exchange with their colleagues, and this is very, very, very important. But there are also established some kind of exchange in video conferences. We have opportunities like video conferences for all the probation officers from the federal state Baden-Württemberg. So, for example, there are some probation officers, they work especially with high risk offending, sexual offenders, and they give a date once a month or something like that, a video conference, and everybody can join to come and talk about this topic, sexual offenses, what is new, what do I have for questions. There are some new things they were established. But I think a really, really difficult thing for many probation officers and for everyone in this new home office and video counseling situation is to make up an end in the home office and to say, okay, my work is done. I'm at home. I was the whole day at home, but now I'm only at home, and I switch off my mobile phone and my notebook, and the clients, they can, through this messenger tools, they can tell the questions, but I will put up my phone at Monday or whenever, and I see the question then. But the client can tell his questions at the moment, and I think that is an advantage. But yes, they have to be very consequent with their work-life balance too, and that is also important.
Perhaps we have to learn that.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's quite new. I see some more questions coming in. Am I right, Mirka?
Yes, you are right. Actually, the first one is something similar, which I wanted to ask. You mentioned that in your presentation that it was up to the probation officers to kind of decide whether their meetings will take place either face-to-face or through video. And actually, one of the question is whether this type of communication should be combined with face-to-face contacts, but most importantly, whether you have any experience in probation with online communication only, and whether this type of communication, if it's only online, whether it works with your probation officers and clients, whether you have this experience.
Yes, I think there are clients, but it's a little, very, very small and little number. And I think Renee told it also in her presentation before, that some certain cases with low risk offenses and less questions, less things to do perhaps, and clients which the probation officer saw in the normal face-to-face contact, yes, every 3 months or something like that. So I think it's not the big number of only video contacts. The main contacts are still the face-to-face.
Okay, we then have one of the participants sharing experience as trainer, who mentions that, I will cite this or quote this, "My experience is like a trainer and facilitate individual and group sessions for offenders of highway since October 2020. I use the video contact through WebEx, and I have observed a more intimate and comfortable environment because clients feel in their own environment." So this is one of the reactions and sharing from one of our participants. And we have another question from Romania, saying that sometimes local probationers, people who live in the city, feel that it's discriminatory if they need to come to the office, and other foreign probationers can only give a call. The question really is how you manage this type of situation in your country.
Yes, that's an interesting question. But I'm sorry, I have no answer at this moment. But I think that that will come to explain this situation. If the clients know, some don't come, but I can imagine it's very similar to the process with the client. Some clients come every week, and some clients come every 3 or 4 months, and probation officers have also explained that to their clients. Yes, I can imagine it's similar to this, but I am sorry that I don't have a really good answer at the moment for this.
No, but that's okay. Yeah. I see one more question coming in. That's I think it's quite general. It's from Alessandra Zajak. She asked, "Do you have in Germany supervision?" And then she means, I think, the supervision as we know it in many jurisdictions. People have to come a low or high or medium risk mandatory meetings for 1 or 2 years with the probation.
Do you mean supervision probation officers themselves, or
no, for probationers, for probationers, yeah, as an alternative sanction.
we only have the probation and the supervision. I'm not really sure if I got it what it means, but
Sorry,
I
sorry.
don't know.
The question was just kind of explained more. It was meant supervision for officers.
Ah,
Oh,
okay.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Doing this video conferences and contact with client.
Yes, we have our probation officers can do supervision. Yes, and in this we also did. I mentioned the victim offender mediation, and in this we do this training for this mediators in-house. That are social workers. They also work as a probation officer, and they can do in-house this victim offender mediation certification. And there we do supervision online. I myself did it also, and I find it quite interesting, and it worked very well. But it's kind of, yes, you have to prepare this supervision conferences really carefully. You have to choose what do I with which methods do I use, whiteboard or something like that, to keep it interesting and to save the things being said.
Okay. I have a question too. Do you also have experience with, because you a video conference, you see an offender in its own environment, meeting a whole family?
Yeah,
Have you experienced with that?
I heard about that, but I can't say that we did no research about that or we did no evaluation, but it could be very, very interesting, because that's also a very important thing in the face-to-face context, to keep near or closer persons, partners or something like that in the face-to-face meetings. And this is also a thing for the video conferences, which is much more easier. Yes.
Okay. Mirka, are more questions?
Yes, we have one question, whether remote consultations are planned, agreed with the client, and how often do the probation officers call their clients in a month? So how often the
Okay.
contact between client and probation officer in a month is, whether there is kind of probably a average number of contacts or not.
When we take a client in probation, then we do social diagnostics, and we do a very close overview from all different topics. Yes, the offense and the life of the client, the home situation, the behavior, and so on. And we do like, we look at the risk factors, but also at the resources and the strengths of this client. And it depends on the case, how often the client has to come to his probation officers. And that can be from once or two times, one time a week, or until every half a year. So I can't say it. I can't say it clearly, because it depends very, very much on this social diagnostics and on the side of the probation officer. And it's very similar to choose, do I use a video contact or a face-to-face meeting?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the case.
Yeah. I see one more question coming in. It's about protection of personal data during of the probationers during an online working. Do you have a law or to use WhatsApp or other messenger tools?
Yes, that was one reason, because we decided to do our own app, because it's very, very difficult with these messenger tools and the fact of the data protections. So we are safe now when we have this tool. And before that, we were advised to use Telegram, because yes, that to that point of time, it was the safest tool for this context. Yes.
Yeah, because it's from what I understand, it's an issue in lots of jurisdictions. Safety, how do we safeguard yeah, our own personal life, our data, things like that. So yeah, well, the former speaker mentioned it too.
Yeah. And one thing to that, the probation officers, they don't use their private mobile. They have a notebook and a mobile from their office. So, yeah.
Okay. Mirka, are there more questions? Thank you all for the questions, by the way. Yeah, I've one more because that triggered me. You mentioned a case of a high-risk offender. Mm-hmm. And that there were special arrangements made. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Do you mean the thing a probation officer told me that yes, it's another kind of use of the video conferences. If sometimes the assessment or the social diagnostics says, okay, there are much risk factors and this client has to be seen very closely. But through these video conferences, you have the opportunity to say, okay, let's do one face-to-face and then one video again and see how it works. Or you can add the video conferences to the face-to-face meetings. And sometimes it's a possibility to made it sure that the clients can speak more often to their probation officer, because they in another situation, in the only face-to-face situation, they have to travel a lot and they work, and it's difficult to find a date or something like that. And so you can use it positive for this high risk offending cases.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much too.
I think we have come to an end of your presentation. I'd like to thank you, Julia, and I'd like to thank everyone who asked a question. Thank you.
Thanks a lot again.
You're welcome. Okay, dear people, I think for what I say, we have come to the end of this webinar. And of course, I'd like to thank René Henskens and Julia Audig for their excellent presentations. And I think they showed us that remote supervision can work with specific group of offenders if there is an existing relationship. But there's still a lot to learn. Their contributions, I think, helped us to identify the importance of our work and how it can develop in the future. Some issues discussed, which I noticed. René mentioned that there is a group of probation officers who miss certain skills to give sufficient substance to remote working. And in a training, workers can learn to give more content and depth to their online counseling conversations. Julia more or less said the same. And it was recommended to draw up a guidance that probation officers can use when structuring their online conversations. And from what I understand, that actually a guidance on how to work remotely will be developed. And cooperation from other countries, so from you, is welcome. And if you like to cooperate, well, send an email to CEP. And Julia Audig addressed at the end of her presentation the very important question too. Well, will it stay? How will it develop? And she says digitalization will be opened up for new opportunities in the field of probation. You mentioned the app, the developing of an app. I think that is one thing what we have to take into account. We will work with online tools more and more. Also, both stress that it must be evaluated in the light of the interest of all those who are involved, the clients, the professionals, and perhaps also the law enforcement agencies. Also, Julia made it clear that we have to invest in data protection. And I think some questions were raised, mentioned the same. The technical equipment and also other professional framework conditions have to be, I would say, according to the normal conditions we have at our office. This made me think the whole discussion also, and it was mentioned too, about remote supervision, that as we speak, the Council of Europe is thinking about how to integrate artificial intelligence in our work. And artificial intelligence, by the way, will be one of the topics on our upcoming conference on electronic monitoring in Helsinki, 23rd until the 25th of May, 2020. For now, I would say, perhaps that's also a topic for the next webinar. As said before, the presentations will be available on the CP website at short notice for your reference, and also a link to the movie, the animation. And as mentioned, the webinar was recorded, and most probably we'll put the recordings of the presentations on our YouTube channel as well. Of course, I also want to comment and thank all participants for their active contribution. And you as probation experts have met at one place and shared related problems. And that is always great and rewarding to see. And finally, I'd like to thank my CP staff member, Ms. Mirjam van der Kooi and Mirka Jakoseva, who work behind the scenes. And also you met Mirka, but always in control and dedicated to make an online event like this to a success. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Confederation of European Probation, once again, I thank you for joining the CEP webinar. Have a nice afternoon and stay safe.